Hi, I've already talked about the human apex predator, but I want to get deeper into it. Firstly, look up these four things: chymotrypsin, pepsinogen, trypsinogen, and protease. Combine that with the inability to digest any plants. This is why vegans cannot even start an argument about it, because if you look at human physiology, we are carnivores. Our digestive tract is 5 times longer than our body. A cat's digestive tract is 4 times longer, and a dog's digestive tract is 6 times longer. So ours is even shorter. And just like them, we absorb the nutrients in the small intestine because we don't have a place to digest plants, because what you have to do is ferment them. So other animals that eat mostly plants have a stomach that has bacteria in them, or they have a long intestine, colon, where they ferment these plants. All carnivores are lean animals. How much bacteria does a human being have in its stomach? Fucking zero. And if we eat the plants that these animals eat that eat mostly plants, we shit them out. Why? Because we don't digest them. And they do. What a joke.
They convert plant protein, which really isn't protein. It's just nitrogenous material content that we multiply by a number and say that's crude protein. Get into that later. And then the low nutrient density organic materials that can be converted into high quality animal products. Simple stomached animals like your pig, your chicken, rats, us. We have the diet coming in, carbohydrate, proteins, fat, enters into gastric digestion, and then in the intestines we have the absorption of sugars, amino acids, and fatty acids. The ruminants add on this anaerobic fermentation vat in front of the gastric digestive system. Their diet is primarily carbohydrate and protein. Within that microbial fermentation process, we have methane produced, we'll talk about that. We have volatile fatty acids produced. We have ammonia produced. Then that digesta flows eventually into the true stomach, the abomasum, where it begins the gastric digestive process. From the intestine, there's very little glucose that gets absorbed. Very little sugar, it's all been fermented. Your cows are in constant ketosis. I don't know, ruminants rule. And the amino acids that they end up digesting are primarily microbial. There is no such thing as an essential amino acid in a ruminant diet. The bugs make the protein that they need. So that's a tremendously important ecological role.
The bottom line here is that if you ever have an argument with a vegan, simply ask them to name you a plant that you can digest. After thinking about it, they will realize that there is no such plant because we cannot digest any of them. So if they tell you to only eat food that you cannot digest, then do you not understand that they are way beyond mentally retarded? And we know that humans are very predatory. If we stop killing other species, then we will start killing our own, which is exactly what's happening right now. This is why there's so many serial killers out there. We don't hunt anymore. And the ones who don't do any of that will obsess over video games. And vegans are especially prone to that because of their depression. And they play them because it's all about killing other creatures, mostly humans, stabbing, shooting, torturing them. So this bloodlust, which we want in our lives, says everything about human beings.
We have Group A, those are sheep, cattle, mountain gorilla. Group B, modern humans, African lion, polar bear. How many people think that Group A is designed to digest a low-fat diet? How many people think Group B is designed to digest a low-fat diet? Trick question, y'all. There's a difference between digest and ingest. And the trick here is that while a cow, for example, will ingest a diet of roughly 5% or less crude fat, she will end up absorbing almost 70% of her energy from volatile fatty acids that were produced in microbial fermentation. Now, mountain gorillas accomplish the same trick, but they have an enlarged cecum. They use post-gastric fermentation. They also have a delightful little practice that they call coprophagy, which I urge you to all look up sometime. So the next time a vegan says, eat like a gorilla, you can say, no.
We are the strongest animals by far, and that's because we don't have built-in weapons in our hands, for example, so to speak, like lions with their paws and claws. If I had a spear growing out of here, for example, I wouldn't be able to grab anything, climb any place, create any tools or weapons. I would be disabled and retarded, but that's exactly how other animals are compared to us. This and this are our strongest weapons. If a lion's claws get cut down, they may not even regrow. Or if another animal's horns get cut down, they may not get lucky. Whereas we can create any kind of weapons, and if they are destroyed, we make new ones. This makes us the most versatile animals there are. If this dimension would restart 1,000,000 times, then we would still always end up with spears, swords, and guns in our hands, because we have a naturally given gift to create these man-made weapons. We don't need proof that we are dominating. You can see the zoos with other animals inside of them. Show me how an elephant is going to create anything even close to that. It couldn't even create a little box. That's why they are disabled, and that's why we can do everything with this and that. I cannot make it any clearer, because vegans always like to say that we should use whatever we have. But this is something that we have. We are able to do it, and there is no rule in nature why we shouldn't use tools. If I would see some kind of oyster there, of course I would try to find a sharp object to open it. Why shouldn't I? I'm allowed to do it. Anything built in us would make us weak. And these teeth are only good for raw meat. If you eat it, then you already know it. If you would try to eat more plants, which is always sugar, then you would get cavities quite quickly. And you would die, because there are no dentists in nature. All that vegans do is try to hide the deterioration of their bodies. And of course they wouldn't even get to this point, because there would be no plants to eat in nature. It's all imported, in case you didn't realize it. And we can get to the brains and the bone marrow of animals. Unlike most animals, some of them try to throw it in the air so it lands on the ground, but usually they fail. Whereas we can grab a stone and open it. Imagine how a wolf would do that.
If you're really interested in carbon capture, if you're having a serious conversation about that, and too often we aren't, grazing systems is the best and only viable method of carbon capture. Here's documentation of a 0.3% increase in soil carbon per year from converting cropland into irrigated dairy pasture in Georgia. If you then start applying those numbers to just a small percentage of the southeastern U.S. alone, what those numbers show is it has never been about the emissions from cattle. It's been about something else. Okay, we can talk about that. We need to be focusing on the water cycle, not the carbon cycle. This is just a demonstration of the difference of soil structure that occurs under long-term grass cover as compared to row cropping, you know, when we produce those healthy vegetables.
This is what wild watermelon looks like, not a lot of fruit flesh at all. It would take a lot longer to eat because we have a natural instinct not to eat the shell, skin, and seeds of fruit, whereas plant-eating animals eat the whole thing, except if they have hands. It tastes good to them and they ferment it, the opposite of us. The skin and seeds are loaded with poisons and anti-nutrients, which they can deal with, but if you would ever swallow the seeds of wild fruit, you would quickly learn not to do it because of your abdominal pain. Same as carnivores who bite into the whole animal. Unlike us, they have no choice. We are picky eaters in that sense. These are wild bananas, the same thing. If you have ever ate wild fruit, you will know that it's a big hassle to get any energy out of it. And by the time you would get some, your teeth would already start rotting. Wild eggplants, quite different looking. Wild carrots. Don't tell me that you would pull that out of the earth and try to eat it. If you would be stupid enough to do so, you would be punished quickly because they are full of a poison called keratotoxin, also known as falcarinol. You would taste it because wild carrots are bitter and burn in your mouth. This was used as a neurotoxic weapon in times of war, and now it's actually called healthy because there's still leftovers in man-made carrots. And this goes for all of the wild vegetables. Many of the so-called antioxidants are actually antibiotics. That includes the beloved flavonoids that vegans like to praise. They kill the bacteria in your body, which you are made out of, and most of them are also full of cell-killing chemicals. This is all declared as healthy nowadays. This is wild corn, it doesn't look edible. Wild avocados, a good example of how little fruit flesh there actually is in wild plants. This is where broccoli, cabbage, kale and all of that garbage comes from. All from one plant. These are wild tomatoes. All of the plants in your supermarket are literally man-made. This is what human beings actually ate in nature. January to February it was all animals. March to April it's all animals again. May to June it's still animals with some berries or other plants at the end of June, if lucky. From July to August you would add more plants to your diet because you would try to eat as many as possible to get fat for winter, if required. You would have to eat buckets full of natural berries and other fruit though. In September and October you may get to eat a bit like a squirrel if food is scarce, because there may be nuts around you if you're lucky. Overeating on them would once again cause abdominal pain because they are loaded with anti-nutrients and other poisons. Soaking them in water is wise before eating. Those may be collected and stored, but they would only last a few weeks, if lucky. November to December you would have used up anything you stored, meaning that you would be back on an all-animal diet. Occasional foods in between may include tree juice and other rare plants, which are hardly a meal, but more of a little boost. Seeds such as grains and beans you may never even come across, and seeing as they are inedible, it's useless to even mention them. It's a very new food for humans. Potatoes and other starchy foods come from South America. They cannot even be eaten raw because they are toxic. It was not an option for Europeans until recently. What about other human races and tropical climates, for example? As reported by tribes, they ate little to no fruit because they absorbed that the people who did got osteoporosis and diabetes. Unripe fruit was preferred. Even in these climates, which most people didn't live in, you still had to deal with the same wild fruit problems as anywhere else, and it would not be easy to find it because it also takes time to grow. When you go to a market in Thailand today, it's imported from all over the place. This is what happens if you feed an animal an unnatural diet.
Heart disease is the leading cause of death among male gorillas in zoos, and recent cardiac ultrasounds indicate both gorillas at Cleveland Metro Park Zoo have the disease.
Bebek and Makolo are two adult male gorillas. One of the most important parts of a gorilla's day in the wild is what it eats and how it spends its time. So we started looking at what we were feeding gorillas and where we could make some improvements.
So they started by getting rid of Bebek and Makolo's processed biscuits. They're full of nutrients, but also high in calories, sugar, and starch.
High carb, aka high sugar diets, are the cause of all modern disease. There is no way to eat that way in nature. Animal cells are made out of saturated fat and cholesterol. Without a source of saturated animal fat, it is impossible to survive, which is why all animals eat a ketogenic diet. We cannot be sure about every single animal out there because we haven't even seen them all, but from the ones we do understand, we can say these things for sure. All animals are omnivores. An herbivore is an animal that eats mostly plants, and whose bacteria converts all of the plants into saturated fat, meaning that all herbivores eat a diet high in saturated animal fat. Carnivores are animals that eat mostly animals, and for the most part it's the ones whose bacteria converted the plants into the saturated fat. By now you should understand that there is no such thing as a vegan animal. When there's only snow around you, you can choose between eating animals or plants, which would mean grass, leaves and branches. For the animals who do eat that, it tastes just like a steak tastes for us. Vegans hate nature, of course, so they choose to eat man-made food and support big pharma instead, which is why Monsanto supports veganism. Most of them don't understand that there's over 50 nutrients that they can't get with their diet, but with synthetic chemical pills and injections, they somehow believe that they will be able to survive. You can see how this turns out in my video, Vegans, the Epitome of Malnourishment. Thanks for watching.